Recognized, Uncle Walker, D01. Recognized, Emily of Arden, D12.
Hello, team. Thanks for joining us for episode 13 of Whelmed, the Young Justice Files Season 2. Welcome to the warehouse. My name is Rich, and I'm here with my co-host, Emily.
Hey, everybody. I don't approve of the warehouse.
You don't like any time we say that. I love it. If you would like to get in touch with us, you can find us on Twitter at the YJ Files, on Facebook at Crashing the Mode, on our website, crashingthemode.com, on the yjfiles.tumblr.com, and at our email address, whelmedpodcast@gmail.com.
No, you're not alone. We're here. We care about you and want to help. And we can do it. Ugh, what is the word? Symbiosis. Together. Help us save you. Symbiosis.
And with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get into Pass On to Emily for...
Hello, Megan.
The title of this week's episode is The Fix. The release date was January 26, 2013, just 1 week after the previous episode on January 19th. The in-episode date was April 9th, and technically I think it goes into April 10th, because we do see the next morning, but there's never a timestamp for it, so I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh, interesting.
The director was Tim DeVar, and the writer was Greg Wiseman.
Some of our special guest voice credits are Wentworth Miller as Deathstroke, which surprised me a little. He's, if you don't know him for some reason, he's plays Captain Cold in Flash, the live-action Flash, and the Legends of Tomorrow. And, of course, he was in Prison Break, etc., etc. I saw a note on the YJ Wiki, thank you, YJ Wiki, that he did the voice this time, but I think because of the other things that were coming up at the time, probably Flash and other stuff, then he had to bow out as Deathstroke, and so they had another actor, and we'll get to him when we get down the line. Of course, we also had Alan Tudyk, who I absolutely adore, as Simon, and Phil Lamar back as Green Beetle.
Just in time for your next mission.
In our pre-credit scene, Artemis is in her bunk on the Manta sub, contemplating how everything became such a disaster so quickly when Black Manta calls her into Calder's room. There, Manta reveals that Simon will be attempting to put Calder's mind back together and would learn all of Calder's secrets in the process, which would be pretty awful for Artemis and Calder, considering they're undercover, and nobody knows.
Yeah, not good. The post-credit scene, Manta orders Tigress to stay with Simon until he's finished healing Calder, and also reveals that he's going to take revenge on Miss Martian for what she did to his son, meaning Artemis also has to try and save her and Calder and stop everything. Good luck.
We then cut over to Star Labs, where McGann is supposed to be psychically examining Green Beetle's mind. After some hesitation, she eventually establishes a mind link, and Green, sensing her fear and trepidation about the current situation, offers to volunteer his thoughts instead of having her seek them out. After a moment, McGann announces that Green Beetle is on their side.
There's some things to say about that.
Yes.
No one's surprised. Back on the Manta sub, Simon is about to enter Calder's mind when Tigress uses a poison dart to knock him out. Black Manta rushes in just as Simon falls unconscious after his brief attack on Artemis, and she lies, saying that perhaps McGann left a psychic virus in Calder's head that would affect any telepath that tried to help him, which is a really cool way to stop them from trying it again.
Yeah.
Artemis volunteers to track down Miss Martian and bring her back to heal Calder herself, and Manta agrees to let her go as long as she brings Deathstroke with her.
Oh no. It's just, everything's going great for Artemis.
Yeah.
No issues. And then it's just time for a musical commercial break for The Reach. Corp's new alien energy drink made by collaborating with The Reach.
Reach
to make
for
Reach.
Reach.
Oh god, it's such a catchy song. Green Beetle reveals that the drink will actually apparently slowly addict the entire population to its formula, while also making them weak and incapable of fighting back when the Reach eventually takes over the world, which, according to Nightwing, matches up with what Flash and the Atom discovered during their research. Green also shares that the drink contains a metagene marker that would allow the Reach to track down people with the potential for superpowers more easily, something the team's analysis hadn't discovered. But since the League's credibility is just shot right now, they can't go public with this crucial information.
Liars! Green Beetle morphs into a human to try to find somewhere to blend in for a while. Lagoon Boy says that he and Miss Marcia need to talk, so they decide to head over to her uncle's apartment in Chicago. And Impulse speeds off, leaving Jaime alone with Green Beetle. After Zeta-ing to Chicago, the start of an emotional conversation between McGann and Lagoon is cut short by the arrival of Tigress and Deathstroke. In the resulting battle, McGann telepathically communicates with Artemis and agrees to be abducted to save Calder. Nightwing and Superboy eventually arrive on the scene, but they're too late to stop the abduction.
Back at Star Labs, Blue Beetle has a conversation with Green Beetle about how to keep his scarab under control. Green suggests training and meditation, but also reveals that he used his shape-shifting abilities to reach inside his scarab and prevent it from taking control. Jaime asks Green to do the same for him and insists that he'll try anything, despite Green's warnings that it might be extremely dangerous.
Yeah. McGann wakes up on the Manta sub in an inhibitor collar, and Black Manta explains that if she attempts to do anything other than heal Calder, she'll be killed. McGann isn't even sure if she can cure Calder, but Artemis offers to psychically enter his mind with her to try and help. We then get a look at Calder's mental landscape, which is the ruins of Atlantis, protected only by a vision of Tula. Oh. So long as Artemis and McGann remember that this place isn't real, nothing can hurt them, according to McGann anyway, but if they allow themselves to give into the illusions, they could suffer severely.
We then cut over to a hospital in Chicago, where Lagoon's broken leg is being treated after the battle with Deathstroke and Tigress. Nightwing breaks up a shouting match between Superboy and Lagoon Boy to reveal the secret about Artemis and Aqualad, an explanation that doesn't really please anyone. While Superboy backs up Dick's decision in front of Lagoon once the two original team members are alone, Connor calls him out on keeping secrets and tells him what McGann did to Calder, why she's been abducted, and how easily this could all fall apart if anything goes wrong.
Back in Calder's mental landscape, McGann and Artemis are being attacked by Tula, quote-unquote. Artemis chooses to abandon a hopeless McGann in order to track down Calder and eventually finds him alone, broken, faceless, just so creeps me out, and rambling in Atlantean. What's left of Calder's psyche is almost sucked into a whirlpool, but Artemis is able to convince him that he can be saved if they all work together. She then saves McGann with a dazed Calder in tow, now with a face, thank goodness, and with the power of friendship, they begin to piece Calder's mind back together.
Power of friendship, man. It's the strongest thing around.
That's right.
Yeah. Artemis is then startled out of the telepathic link by Black Manta coming to speak with her on the physical plane. Over 6 hours of telepathic connection have elapsed, and they've only just begun to heal Aqualad. But it's enough for Manta to agree not to kill McGann, at least not yet. The next morning in Taos, Impulse is concerned to find Green Beetle working on Blue Beetle's scarab, only for Jaime to reassure him that apparently the scarab is silent, and he's permanently free from the Reach's control.
Nice.
That's where we end it.
Yeah. Mixed bag on this one. Let's dive in.
Superboy, are you alright?
I'm fine. Feeling the Aster.
So, a lot happened this episode. And I'm going to start with my one negative point on this episode and then move on to all the stuff that I like, because it's better to end with the stuff that we like than the stuff that we don't.
I agree.
I feel like a lot of the dialogue in this episode and a lot of the internal narration from Artemis particularly is really heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very much, it's her stating everything that we've seen so far, that we haven't seen Artemis in a couple of episodes. Okay, we need a reminder of things, but there's a little bit of a reminder, and there's rehashing literally everything that we saw a couple of episodes ago. And I feel like this leans way more towards the second part.
Yeah, I agree with you. We talked about this last episode as well, and I think you probably watched a bunch of these all in a row, and it just this one even hammers it in, yeah. I find some kind of balanced dichotomy in the fact that Artemis gets this huge exposition episode in the same way that Wally got cold-hearted and spent a lot of time talking to himself in that one as well.
Spitfire's not good at internal narration.
I know, right? I have a bunch to say in the Canary Debrief about like how to fix this problem. At least it's a pretty easy way to try at least get a pass on it. But there's definitely a lot. And Stephanie Lemlin, you can tell when an actor is doing the best they can with the words that they've got.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff she was saying was a bit of a mouthful. And
she's a fantastic actress, and she
great.
does amazing with what she has. And some of the subtler lines in this episode are fantastic for how much emotion she's able to pack into just saying the word perfect. You understand? There's like talking about this when I was writing these notes. There's so much exposition, and then there's just perfect, said in two different tones, unlike what I just did. And they convey so much about her internal mindset at this time, whereas she's just had like a block of text 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So, didn't you just say you saw Stephanie Lemlin in a live action role somewhere? Didn't you just tell me that?
I did indeed. Oh, because we were talking about this before we started recording. I'm a child, and I occasionally watch current Disney Channel shows because I'm a child.
You say this to a 47-year-old man who's got a podcast twice a week about an animated series. I'm just pointing it out.
Yeah, we're the coolest kids at the lunch table.
Give yourself a break.
Yeah, but I was catching up on Girl Meets World, which is on Netflix right now. Very cool show, sequel to Boy Meets World, classic. And about his kids and their adventures, about Corey's kids and their adventures. And in one episode, the main character, Riley, and her friend ran into a famous actress, a famous fictional actress, who was supposed to be a French actress who I don't even remember what her character's name was, but she was played by Stephanie Lemlin, and the moment she walked on screen, I was like, is that who I think that is? And I paused it and Googled to make sure. I went to IMDb and was like, were you really in an episode of Girl Meets World? She was. And the moment she started talking, despite having a French accent, she still sounded like Artemis. So apparently, Artemis is like Stephanie Lemlin's default voice a little bit.
That's funny.
But that was a fun thing. The whole episode, I'm like, you're going from a French accent to a Southern accent, and yet in both, you still sound like Artemis.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah.
You have a bunch of stuff, like, besides some of the exposition.
Yes, besides that, moving on to other things. One thing that I wanted to talk about, because I was reminded of it when watching this episode, is there is a bit in Artemis's opening monologue, in her little internal thing, where she's talking about everything, and she starts talking about, like, what was I thinking? Me and Wally had something really good, and I ran off and did this. And I remember when it first premiered, I remember seeing some people online really were very mad about this line, and were very much feeling like it made it seem like Artemis, who is such an independent, strong character, was being dependent on Wally and feeling like her choices weren't valid and she should have just stuck with her boyfriend. And they felt like that was what the show was trying to say. And I never felt like that. Wow. Like the first time I read that, I was like, I was shocked that people were thinking that. And like, I can understand how someone might think that, but I always interpret it as her just realizing I made kind of a really rash decision because I was missing being a hero. And now that I am back here, my life is being threatened. One of my best friends' lives is being threatened, and everything has gone horribly wrong. I'm reevaluating that a little bit, and she's missing her long-term boyfriend at the same time, which is not a bad thing, and people should be allowed to do that without being labeled as being weak. Her and Wally have been together for 5 years, and she gave up being with him and going to college to go do this. Yeah. And she's not really happy with her decisions. So, like... Yeah,
I mean, I agree with you on that myself. I never read it like that at all. I mean, geez, Artemis is incredibly independent, but just because she's independent doesn't mean that she can't have a relationship that she loves and cares about whoever she's in the relationship with. I mean, and I don't find those mutually exclusive, I guess. I suppose some shows would probably handle that poorly, but I did not. I think they've established Artemis well enough that just didn't, at least for me, it didn't occur to me. So, interesting. I love this comment you made about Manta.
Manta ships Sea Arrow. Manta wants Calder and Artemis to be together and doesn't.
Apparently.
He does. He makes the comment and he's like, my son never spoke of his feelings, but I knew. I'm like, okay.
That's so, and you know
man.
what? The first 10 times I watched this, I was just like, oh, his feelings of that you're awesome and that you're a great sidekick and a cool villainess. Thanks for being a cool villainess. That's what I thought. I didn't why? Because Manta's coming out of nowhere with this. Really? They're both super stoic, not at all flirting with each other.
No.
Super standoffish. Manta, you got a weird, I don't know. It just feels not weird, but it's just coming out of nowhere. I don't know. It was funny. And then when I saw it this time, and I'm like, literally this time, after seeing it scores of times, I was like, does he want them to be together? And then I saw your notes, and I was like, oh, I guess that's a thing. I guess that's a thing that I had no. Emily, Neal, and I just spent a long time offline talking about how men can be clueless, and apparently this is one of my signature cluelessness moments.
It's also just because shipping. I'm more tuned into it. I pick up on things.
Yeah, apparently.
But yeah, that always amused me. The Artemis is just like, I don't talk about my feelings either. Dude, no. But she can't say that.
Yeah.
Because he's her boss.
Yeah.
But I really love in the scene where McGann is supposed to be psychically interrogating Green. She is clearly uncomfortable, and they don't just leave it at McGann is clearly uncomfortable and no one comments on it. They have Lagoon Boy tell her, oh, it's fine, just go ahead. You can totally do this. I believe in you. And Nightwing's like, you need to do what needs to be done. And Connor tries to step in for her. And I love it. I love that they bothered to include that line. I love that is absolutely something Connor would do after the previous conversation that they had behind closed doors about what happened and what went down. And he's just goes, there has to be something else we can do. He's not gonna force her. He's just like, no, how about can we think of something else? And Nightwing's like, no, it's fine.
Well, and part of this, I mean, it does make Connor look good. It does. And it does make Lagoon Boy look bad. But it is a little frustrating because it's not Lagoon Boy's fault in this one. I'm going to step in for Lagoon Boy. Because and for Nightwing for that matter, because neither one of them knows what happened. Yes. And Connor's getting kind of bent out of shape that they need to find something else to do. And there's no reason for anyone to suspect this. And so poor Lagoon Boy, thinking he's being supportive and encouraging and I believe in you, is actually making things so much worse for him in this relationship. And the poor guy, I'm sorry, I'm going to give him a moment. The poor guy has no idea what he's stepping in. But it's not his fault because nobody's told him what's happened. So, yeah, that's a tough one.
I'm like, I may hate on Lagoon Boy, but I don't think he is in the wrong in this moment. As an audience member, we know that he's not helping, but in universe, I agree that he is not actively being terrible. He is genuinely trying to be helpful and nice and supportive. It just backfires very much.
So one of the things I'd mentioned earlier while we were going through the read through was this moment too, where when I'm looking at a scene, particularly a scene like this, there are lots of things that I go through my head about what's happening in the background. Some of this is going to have to be crash into mode, but Green Beetle's approaching this and wanting to be helpful and wanting to give information. The whole point of McGann reading his mind is so that she can find out whether or not he's on their side. But he has to volunteer, quote unquote, information. So why is he volunteering it? And is that really helpful? And, it's interesting. We'll dive into a little bit more about this crashing the mode, about what was the thought process from Green's point of view. I don't want to spoil too much.
With that scene, though, with the continued thing in that scene, and while this episode has some weird stuff with dialogue, it also does a few things really well with people communicating silently. Because one moment in this episode that I love is when Lagoon Boy tells McGann we need to talk. She looks back over her shoulder at Connor, who just shrugs and walks away. And it's clear that they were intending to talk or that something was supposed to happen, and then Lagoon Boy stepped in and was like, we need to talk, and she was like, oh okay. Sure. And Connor walks away, and there's no conversation about, like, wait, we were supposed to talk about things. Connor just goes, okay, fine.
I read that scene totally differently, by the way.
Oh, speak. Say words. I want to hear.
So she looks at him, and I did not think it was obvious that they were going to go talk somewhere at all. I thought it was McGann looking at Connor in a way of like, I'm stuck in a situation.
Bail
I
me
feel
out?
like, not bail me out. I think that when they talked in private, of course they talked about what had happened to her. Clearly she didn't tell him about Calder being undercover because he didn't know that until Nightwing revealed it. So she held something back.
I don't think she did, but we can talk about that.
I think Connor didn't know. I think Connor, when Nightwing revealed it, I think he was as shocked as Lagoon was. I could be wrong. It could be read either way, but that's the way I read it, which means that McGann had honored Calder and Artemis's wishes in that people didn't need to know, and she didn't tell Connor. But what I do think happened behind closed doors is they had an intimate moment where she was realizing she could share things with Connor that she would not and could not or wouldn't share with Lagoon, which means that they had a moment together, at least an emotional moment, which means in that moment, right after they had an emotional bonding moment, McGann turns to Connor when Lagoon says, we need to talk, and turns to him like, we just had this bonding moment. I'm feeling conflicted and confused. And Connor shrugs at her and says, you made this choice with him, not me. And then turns around and leaves. Like, I don't have anything to say in your relationship. You have to deal with this yourself. Like, that's it. And turned around and walked away. So I read all of that very differently than you. And I think both of them are interesting. But I think they can be interpreted in different ways. Connor could have known and backed Nightwing, but he stood up and crossed his arms and was looking at Nightwing like, are you kidding me right now? Because when he goes out in the hallway, because Connor didn't say anything to Nightwing before this moment.
Yeah.
About how Calder, he was telling Nightwing in the hallway, like for the first time, are you kidding me? Like he put all the pieces together. The reason she got kidnapped must have been because of X, Y, and Z that you didn't feel like you wanted to share with us. And now we didn't know this. And because we didn't know this, now McGann is in danger, right? He's not blaming himself for not bringing it up to Nightwing earlier. He clearly, to me, he clearly didn't know, which means McGann didn't tell him all the specifics.
That's really interesting because I have never seen it that way. I have my entire viewing of this show always thought that she would have told him all of this simply because if she said, like, I fried Calder's mind, she was fine with that decision until she realized Calder wasn't evil. And so, like, it wouldn't have made sense, like, to me, in my mind, of if she'd said, I fried Calder and I feel bad about it, that would have seemed odd in some way if she hadn't further explained because I found out all of this.
And I don't think so at all. So my headcanon is she's having a conversation with Connor and she knows how Connor feels about her using her powers this way. So in my headcanon, they're in the room and she's saying, I fried Calder's mind. And in that, and remembered that this is not a villain, that this was a friend of ours. That this was someone that we cared about and worked side by side with for 5 years. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I made a mistake in the past. Maybe I'm sorry. And maybe I'm realizing that you were right. To me, that's the moment they had, was that beginning thing of her starting to admit that she was wrong and to Connor. And she can do all of that without outing anything else. And for her, I think she's reluctant in any of this conversation to be like, I screwed up. I don't want to screw up anymore. Nightwing, Artemis, Calder, clearly they had a reason that maybe I don't know about of keeping this a secret. I can't screw up again and tell somebody that they didn't tell in the first place. Like, she doesn't have enough perspective on the situation, at least in my mind, right at the moment, of what happened to Calder. So to me, I think it's perfectly reasonable that she didn't tell him everything. But again, this is all my headcanon. We don't know what happened behind closed doors. I don't know. I'm making stuff up. But that's the way my brain put the puzzle pieces together. Same puzzle pieces. We just put them together in different ways.
Yeah. No, we'll talk about that a little later when we get to that scene with Superboy and Lagoon Boy. But I want to go through some other stuff before we talk about that because I have a lot of words on that one. I love how clever Artemis is, that in however short amount of time she had, she came up with a plan to get Simon out of the way and have it make sense, and had everything she needed at her disposal to do exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Artemis and how just amazing she is. And it amuses me that bee poison is an invention of her father, Sportsmaster. Just she hates her dad. Sometimes her dad is useful.
It makes me wonder, though, which is interesting. Maybe it's a bit of a Batman gimmick. If you guys have seen the Justice League Doom animated movie, or read the arc that's based on, where basically Batman has a contingency plan for every Justice Leaguer in case they go rogue and how to stop them, and villains get a hold of that plan and start destroying the Justice League. I can absolutely see Sportsmaster saying, like, oh, how do I take out Mala? How do I take out the Brain? How do I take out Simon? How do I take out all these threats? And having a contingency plan that he either taught Artemis or, like, she would have been able to figure out on her own because she's smart. You know what I mean? Like put the pieces together. I like that a lot, too.
Also, the next thing is Reach for a Reach is hilarious and will never not be hilarious. And even more hilariously, I realized this time through, I'm pretty sure is sung by the same voice actor who voices Impulse.
No, I'm sure it is, because I didn't realize that either until he started singing, and I'm like, oh no, that's absolutely the irony that Impulse is basically singing this Reach for a Reach song. And it is painfully limericky,
perfect,
earwormy. It's really hard to get it out of your head.
It's so great. I love it. And it also just reminded me of because sometimes I like to share fun, crazy stuff that happened in the fandom way back when, because I was engaged in that part of the culture for this show. After this episode, and after all of the stuff that happens with Reach in this season, and after season 2 ended and everyone was trying to do the campaign to get season 3, one thing was someone made a template that you could print out online that was a Reach label drink bottle. It was like the label on a bottle that you could print out and tape or glue around a vitamin water bottle, which look exactly like the Reach bottles and come in fluorescent colors like the Reach bottles.
I think Christopher Jones, the artist for the comics, I think I saw pictures of him with his own versions.
Yeah,
of them.
he made some of them, and people were making them and taking photos of them and or sending them to Cartoon Network as a way of being like, we really love Young Justice. We love Young Justice so much that we made the fake drink that exists in Young Justice to tell you how much we how much we love Young Justice. Please bring it back. So I just wanted to share that because that's always fun. I was trying to track down the template again online and I couldn't find it anywhere.
If anybody's got it out there or knows the link, shoot it our way.
Send it to us. I want to find them again because they were great. They were really cool. Like they had the whole nutrition facts on them and everything.
Nice.
I also really love in the middle of the abduction of Miss Martian, that whole little scene. I love that her and Artemis come up with a plan telepathically while still fighting each other. Because I love that. I love when we can do the thing that we did in season 1 all the time of talking during combat. Because it's the logical solution. It's the logical solution for figuring out how to make this situation work.
Yeah. And you know that Artemis already thought of this on the way there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Oh, yeah.
And
so
I love
good.
that Megan's like, okay, sure, throws a car.
Not that good.
That's her solution.
Yeah. The only thing I have in that one scene, I mean, the fight scene was really good, and there's no... Sorry, Lagoon, man. Deathstroke's going to take you down. But I love the line that Deathstroke has about, like, an animal, like, so insulting and condescending, an animal in pain, and how about some anesthetic, and punches him in the face, and, like...
Yeah.
It's a good line, for sure. The thing of him, like, not killing Lagoon because he wasn't, like, part of a contract or something always just kind of makes me, okay, it's kids show. Like,
kids
I just can't see. Yeah, I might have, if I was writing it myself, I might have tried to find a way for Lagoon to, like, get away so that Deathstroke thinks, like, or gets knocked somewhere.
Or have Artemis cut him off and be like, he's not part of the mission, we need to go.
Right, or like, okay, Lagoon's gotten away, but who the freak cares about Lagoon? Priority is the mission. Okay, I'm going to decide to go do something else. It's just not a Deathstroke personality kind of thing in my mind, for me, anyway. But the fight was great.
Yeah, it's a very cool fight scene. The fact that they knock Miss Martian out with fire always makes me sad on some level. It's the thing of just using all of your friends' weaknesses against them because you know how to do it. And it's like, oh no. You had to make it real, but she would have just pretended to pass out if you'd punched her really hard. You didn't need to, like, do that. You gave your best friend heat stroke.
She's never been taken down with a punch, though. Deathstroke's smart enough for that. Like, pulling punches,
I meant Miss Martian.
You said Miss Martian could have been punched in the face and pretended to pass out?
Yes.
She's never been taken out with a punch, so I just don't think Deathstroke would have done that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just feel bad for my favorite Martian.
I know, of course.
I absolutely love when we see Calder's broken psyche. Like, it's sad and it breaks my heart, but it's also so cool. Like, it looks incredible. Like, the way this show does psychic landscapes is so cool. And we haven't seen one since, really seen one since season 1 in Bereft, when they're inside Miss Martian's head, her and Simon have their crazy psychic battle.
Yes.
And it's this cool amalgamation of, like, thinking back on it, it kind of looks like TV sets, because they're all just kind of mashed together, and it's all the places that are important to her. And it's so cool, and I love it. And it's them floating over, and if you look in the background, you can see, like, the main hall of the cave, and the kitchen, and, like, other random places, and, like, the high school and stuff. And it's super cool.
The idea that they're all, like, television screen equivalents for her, but Calder's looks totally different. I never thought about that. That's cool.
Fun.
Yeah.
Fun facts, fun insight. Whereas Calder's is Atlantis, but destroyed. And that is so cool and provides such cool visuals because they can swim. And that's interesting, but it's just so cool. And the fact that Tula is the one coherent thing in his mind, that even now, even with everything destroyed, it's not the team, it's not Aquaman, it's not his best friends, it's Tula.
Yeah.
And she is incredibly fierce and is just there to protect him.
There's a scene in there too that I saw some people commenting on about, wait a minute, so McGann gets in there, she explains the rules of the world to Artemis, but then totally falls subject to the rules because and they were bothered by that, and I was like, really? Because that made perfect sense to me. Like, when they first got there, McGann's on task. We got there, McGann's on task, this is what we do, this is what happens when we get here. Then Tula shows up, she starts feeling guilty, and then suddenly, like, she realizes, like, all of the stuff that's going on and what has happened to him and the fact that she can't possibly put him back together at all. And then all of this stuff comes crashing down on her. It doesn't become a cut and dried black or white, A or B situation, right? Artemis is emotionally detached from the consequences of McGann's actions in Calder. So she can follow those rules and keep it together long enough, which is great. But I absolutely see McGann, like, losing her toehold and going and spiraling. I think it's perfect myself.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I don't think it was her forgetting that it wasn't real exactly. Like, I don't think she was like, whoops, now I don't remember this thing that I just explained. Course, yeah. Especially because it's also, when she says it to Artemis, it's before she's even, like, looked around and seen everything.
Yep.
Once that happens and once Tula shows up, it's not her forgetting, it's her accepting. Like, she is ready to give up and die.
She said something like, end it. Doesn't she say that? She says, like, end it.
Yeah. She says, I deserve it. She says, end it. She is literally just muttering all my fault over and over again as Tula attacks her.
Yeah.
And it is heartbreaking. And God.
Artemis pulling her out of it too. That line of Artemis is so good. You want
to blame yourself, fine, but you have to be willing to do something about it.
Yeah, great lines. So good.
It's an amazing line. Going back a little bit to one more thing that I wanted to talk about, besides also with that same thing with the Calder psyche that is incredible. I love that Artemis is in her normal Artemis gear because her mental image of herself is still her, not Tigress. So I thought that was a cool little touch.
Yeah, I agree.
And some of the stuff that they do with her, with transitioning between what she looks like as Tigress and, like, her looking in mirrors and seeing herself is really cool, because there's one where she's facing away from a mirror and there's black hair. And as she turns, it goes from being black hair to being a shadow on blonde hair, and then back again when she turns back. And I'm like, that's good animation.
Yeah,
that's a good choice right there.
I just had a couple of things. One of them was the little line, like when McGann is reading Green's mind.
Yes.
And he's volunteered, to open his mind to her, but he's also reading her mind. and says, you're hiding the specifics, but, I see that you've got a history of, something bad happened, right? Like, there's little things in that scene, we're going to dive into a bit in Crashing the Mo. There's little things in that scene to keep in mind, like little hints of things to come and ideas. And it also feeds into what I was talking about earlier about, I still feel like McGann is purposefully hiding, like purposefully playing it close to the vest that she knows about Calder. Because she has no reason to hide that from Green, but it seems to be instinctive.
They don't trust him yet.
Well, true, but I don't think that she's gone through the whole thought process about that. I don't think she intended to share any of that at all, which means that she's got that on lockdown, like reflexively, even to Connor, which again feeds into my own headcanon. But speaking of that, let's get into the Canary debrief a bit and then crash the mode on some of that as well.
Before we're done with all of this, I did want to talk about the scene in the hospital, because I love that scene with Superboy, Lagoon Boy, and Nightwing, and we didn't talk. We talked a little, we touched on it, and we're like, we'll get to it later. First, I want to say Connor shouting, "You have no idea what I feel for her," I love that line so much, and I love it. And I talked a little bit about this in my Super Sweethearts series that exists now, but I love that this show acknowledges that everything between them in season 2 is complex, and it is not just either of them being mad at each other for any sort of reason. It's complicated.
It's layered.
And Nolan North is incredible and puts so much emotion into this line, because it's Lagoon Boy accusing Connor of just not caring and of just being willing to let McGann die because he doesn't like her or whatever.
He literally says,
Lagoon Boy is trying to push.
Do you hate her that much? He says hate. Yeah.
Yeah, and Connor responds with, "You have no idea what I feel for her." And I'm like,
so good. I agree.
I love it. No one can see this, but I'm just flailing. Okay, I love that. But in that scene, I also, when it's followed up by Nightwing being like, "Okay, I'm gonna give you all the exposition you need so you guys stop fighting about things," and Superboy saying, "No, Nightwing's our leader," and all of that. I personally always thought that he knew and was just not going to bring it up because he wasn't supposed to know. That he knew, he's like, "I'm not supposed to know this, so I won't bring it up to Nightwing, and we'll see how this plays out." And then once Nightwing brings it up, Connor's like, "Okay, now I can talk about this, and now I can call you out on what you did." Like, he was gonna let it slide, and then it comes up and he's like, "No, not gonna let this slide."
Interesting.
Also, the fact that he finally brings up everything about Miss Martian and about Calder to him in that, I think, is also partially because there were more immediate issues at first with Lagoon Boy getting injured and them having to get to the hospital. Like, they couldn't have shown up and been like, "Oh, Miss Martian's been captured. This guy's got a broken leg, but first let me tell you why my ex-girlfriend just got captured. Let me explain, then we can talk about this." Like, there was some more immediate stuff they had to deal with before Connor could explain things. But I just overall really love this scene, and I love that Connor attempts to keep the peace even though he is clearly pissed at Nightwing from the minute Nightwing brings it up. He's like, oh, you're finally going to tell us now? Cool. I'll back you up right now because we don't need this kid getting in the way of this, but you're wrong, and calls him out in the hallway and is like, "I disagree with everything you've done. Bye," and walks away.
I love the idea that he backs him in front of somebody else. And I think it's because because of a marriage thing. Like, my wife and I do that. Like, she'll say something to the kids, and I may not agree with her, but I will back her in the moment, and then we can talk about our different opinions about it later. Not that we don't argue in front of the kids. I think it's okay to argue in front of kids because they also get to see how you resolve arguments, and that's okay. It's a good thing to do. But there are definitely times where I'm like, I don't know about that, but I'm going to back your play because you brought it up, and then we will talk about it later. And I think it's a respectful. It's a way of showing respect. As pissed as Connor is, he's still showing Nightwing respect, and also thinking like maybe there really is a reason he didn't tell us, but I don't know what it is yet. But whether he has it or not, all of this is a disaster. And it's because you didn't tell us. It better be a good reason, which he never gets. So, yeah, interesting.
Because you decided it was a bad idea to share. I'm like,
yeah,
Connor is saying what I've been saying all season. Thank you. I appreciate this validation.
All right, Canary debrief.
Stick around. Class is in session.
So we're going to talk a little bit about dialogue. In this case, unfortunately, some of the dialogue in this episode is a little bit heavy. as we mentioned before. So it's one of the few episodes, Cold Hearted being the other one for me, which was a lot of exposition that I felt like could be handled a little differently. But it's only in part of this episode. Like, Emily's right, the exposition in the opening, it's a bit too much. It feels long, and it's hard for Stephanie, as we were mentioning, to kind of act naturally and wrap herself around these lines. At least twice I heard the perfect word echoed when it was perfectly subtle to just do it once. As Morgan Jenkins had just mentioned in our discussion session with him, that specific scene, actually. But in the second half of the episode, things tighten up a lot, especially during the mental landscape scene with Artemis, saving Calder and snapping McGann out of it. It gets tightened up quite a bit at the end, so that's good. But how do you avoid dialogue that doesn't sound natural? Like, it's pretty common. Writing dialogue can be hard for a lot of people. The best way that you can do it is actually the easy draft solution is surprisingly easy, which is say it out loud to yourself after you write it. I mean, now I've told you in Canary Debriefs to, 1, listen to the character voices talking to you in your head when they tell you something, and 2, talk to yourself out loud. Welcome to the life of a writer. When you say the dialogue out loud, it's shocking how immediately you will be able to find the rough spots, the repetitions, the uses, the echoing of words, the strange, like, unnatural phrasing that might have sounded good in your head and is perfectly reasonable for a first, second draft, third draft even. Like, it is so much more important to finish what you're writing on the page than it is to get it right, perfectly right, supposedly, the first time. That's never going to happen. Or so rare, it's don't even mention it. Write what you got to say, then go back and clean it up and fix it. And the easiest way to do dialogue, say it out loud to yourself. If you're tongue twisting around what it is that you're saying, more than likely either an actor that you're writing for or somebody who's reading it in their head is going to do the same thing. It's not going to sound natural. So try that out.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
All right, let's crash the mode.
Tell us something we don't know yet. Sorry, BB. We can't risk altering the time stream. We do that, we're all feeling the mode.
Forget to say this last episode. In Crashing the Mode, we'll be discussing spoilers for Young Justice and the DC Universe. If you are spoiler wary, consider this your warning. So, all the stuff I've been beating around the bush with Green, I don't know what his plan was. Like, he didn't know what was going on in Miss Martian's head, so he's sitting there and he's like, I want you to read my mind. Okay. I mean, I'm assuming he's a pretty powerful telepath. He probably also has some assistance from the Scarab, but it's already been established by Jean that Miss Martian's the most powerful telepath on the planet. And I would think that Simon would tell them that. So I'm interested to figure out, like, what was Green's plan. It worked out really well for him. He was able to offer up exactly what he wanted to offer up. But that was unrelated to, that plan was unrelated to knowing what happened to McGann. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense.
He had to have another plan. I think that they were smart enough that he would have had an original plan that he just adapted to. But, yeah, that one's interesting to me. I was just going to say real quick, the thing I was saying earlier, about the fact that they wrote in just real quickly where he's like, oh, I see you're hiding the details. That was important to say because we find out later he's actually working for the Reach and the Light. So if he could have outed Calder in a heartbeat, right? But by actually saying that, when you go back and rewatch it, you realize, oh yeah, okay. So they painted it red, right? They made it clear. What were you going to say?
The only thing I can think of from just years of reading stuff with telepaths in them and whatnot is sometimes you can make the argument that someone is hiding some sort of information or defending it and, like, might not be able to pick up on the fact that someone is shielding a secret in their mind. Again, all of this is theoretical because we're talking about telepathy like it's real, but you could have made the argument that maybe even going into it originally, his first plan was like, I'll just keep that stuff in the back with some mental barriers in the way.
And I'm sure that they have powerful meditative techniques, but if I say, don't think about an elephant, you're immediately thinking about an elephant. So, like, it's really hard to just say, oh, I'm going to go in and guard this information from a telepath. I'm going to think about the information that I need to guard. Like, I'm not saying that it can't be done, and I'm sure that the Martians have, like I said, powerful techniques, and or the Scarab being able to help. Maybe even like, I want you to download this bunch of information into the Scarab, hold it until we're done, and then upload it back into my brain. I could totally see that being a shtick. So, I mean, there's definitely something. We just didn't know what that was, and it hasn't been addressed that I'm aware of. So, again, something you got to think about when you're dealing with stuff like time travel we've talked about, and with telepathy, and with all that kind of stuff. You really need to spend your time thinking about the consequences. And then deciding how far you want to go.
Yeah, with the ongoing thing of, I've mentioned the inheritance cycle before. Psychic combat is a big thing in that series.
Yeah.
And people being able to communicate with their minds, and people being able to extract information from other people's minds gets brought up a lot. And so it's also brought up a lot ways of trying to fight that, and trying to be like, how do you stop someone from taking what you are trying to not have them see in your mind and stuff.
Right.
So I was thinking about all of that as we are talking about this, and all of the various ways that they talk about in that, of different things.
There are
different theoretical ways to use magic to not have people read your mind.
Yeah, and I don't hand wave like people were like, well, it's a superhero show, why do you put so much thought into it? Because when you have people flying and crazy stuff happening, you have to ground it in something that makes sense. Otherwise, it's chaos, and it doesn't make any sense. There are a few books that manage to pull off not having a system of magic and just doing magic, to solve all their problems. It's not a good idea. Figure out what your rules are in your world so that you can have drama around whether or not they will work or not. Otherwise, you're just making things up. Yeah. Anyway, all right, let's get on to fan service. You got some stuff for us.
I've admired your stance on animal rights for years.
So, today I have some fun fan art from a Tumblr called baddiesketches.tumblr.com, who's done a lot of awesome Young Justice stuff. They've got some really cool, interesting designs for like different takes on characters' costumes, and there's some really cute, fun, silly stuff as well in there. There's one that I love that's like kind of a season 3 redesign for Miss Martian that's really cool, that's in there somewhere that I really like. And there's a bunch of other stuff. There's
some really cool stuff on that site, yeah.
Everything there. Awesome sketches, some really awesome designs for different stuff. Just gonna throw out that there is some non-canon smoochies and some various fan works of just what if fun stuff like that. There's some swearing in captions and things like that, so just proceed with caution if you feel necessary, but overall, it's really fun, and there's just some really great art there.
I think that's the great thing about fan work, though. I mean, non-canon relationships, thought experiments, what if, X, meant Y instead. That's the way creation works. That's the way imagination works. That's the way creativity works. So I think it's great. Just have a heads up. If you're not big on non-canon relationships or, thought experiments that go in weird directions or include cursing or other things that you didn't see in the show, then it's all good. So we'll have links for that.
There's also a really cute little Christmas comic that I threw in there. It's super cute from them.
It was really cute. We'll have links to both of those in the show notes. All right. Well, I think we can wrap up this mission and head out of the warehouse. It's so weird to say.
Still in the cave.
No. The crater. The best way to support the show is with a 5-star review on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice, of course.
Please continue to hashtag buy YJ Comics on Comixology, and while you can't keep binging YJ on Netflix, you can, however, buy the show on Amazon, iTunes, and wherever else you want to be able to watch it before it comes to the DC streaming site that we will eventually be getting. You can also use hashtag Young Justice Outsiders when talking about Season 3, because we're all waiting for that. And if you want to help us get more episodes, more Secret Origins, actual play podcasts, and more, please consider supporting us through Patreon. For just a few dollars a month, you can help us do even more with the show while getting some great rewards for yourself.
Speaking of which, we have a new Patreon backer as of this morning, actually, of this recording, and I wanted to give them a quick shout out because they offered up some pretty cool insights. Ashley Little, thank you so much for your support. Ashley was talking about she had just heard Darkest, and she commented about when Artemis enters the cave through the vent over the stove. She said, I love the little nod there to Homefront when she and Dick were escaping from the invading Reds, and now she's the invading force. There's such a symmetry in that moment, which I thought was super cool. Also, yeah, she said, also, I just keep imagining, this is great, I love this, I just keep imagining Jaime in school taking a test or something, and the Scarab berating him for not remembering the answer when they went over it the previous night studying. And she says, I'd love to see more of how the Scarab intersects with Jaime's civilian life. That is hilarious, and I love it.
I want that now, too. I want that so bad.
I do, too.
Like, that hadn't even crossed my mind. I love it.
Me either. Anyway.
And remember,
stay whelmed, everyone.
You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our hosts are Rich Howard and Emily Booza. Our editor and producer is Neal Powell. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.